Hej alle sammen, og velkommen til et interview, men ingen ringer end J.A. Skeets. J.A. Skeets. I tried to do my research.
Okay.
And like the J.E. part, and then you can just tell me your actual name, and then explain how does that come about?
It's not a great story. I started blogging way back in like the early 2000s, and I was at a corporate job. Didn't want to use my real name, which is Phil. And so I was like, okay, I need some stupid name, and it just popped in my head. And I went with it, and now 20 years later, that's all I'm addressed by. So that's how I got there.
And 20 years later, here we are, Paris.
Yes.
City of love.
Yeah, your favorite city.
You shouldn't start out with that. But I was just thinking, like, obviously you had a very long career covering the NBAs in all sorts of ways. Being here in Paris, City of Love, does that like bring back memories from doing like Romance on the Hardwood?
Oh, that's where you're going with that. You kept saying City of Love, and I was
Thanks,
like,
guys.
he's going to get to it. Yes, it's full circle, isn't it?
Yep.
That's right. Those weird blog posts I did where it looked like two NBA players were possibly slow dancing with each other and writing weird commentary about it. Now I'm here in the City of Love in Paris for the games. Yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah.
Magnifique.
And how about this whole like global games? But obviously, as a Canadian, you have a slight more bias towards us Europeans,
Sure.
like liking it.
Sure.
But like, what is your impression of it all?
I'm honestly sort of blown away with like I didn't know what to expect. I thought maybe it's just the games and that's it. But all the activations they are doing around the city, and you see all the fans in their jerseys, they're helped out by Wemby being the key piece to all this. I was joking that they should almost change it to the Wemby games instead of the Paris games, NBA Paris games, because that's what it feels like. Yeah. But it's amazing. It's fun for me, who does a daily show, to be reminded, like, it's more than people in America or North America that are basketball fans. And in fact, the people I meet from all over the world, they're diehards. They're the sickos, as we call them on No Dunk. So it's really it's refreshing, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about like the fan atmosphere in Europe in other sporting events like soccer and stuff like that, and we always hear about those NBA crowds, like the intimidating crowd of Boston and stuff like that. How does that compare now that you've seen it firsthand?
Well, I'll roll my eyes at those intimidating NBA crowds. In the playoffs, sure, a different story. Fans are really into the game and knowledgeable and all that. But even the game one here of the Paris games, was sort of taken back by the crowd. Like how into a regular season game they were between the Spurs and Pacers, in late January. They were hyped, and there was more of a buzz, I thought, and sort of a focus on the actual game, especially when Wemby had like 3 or 4 blocks in a row and diamond up guys and dunking and all that. Like, place was pretty electric. But European crowds, still much better than NBA crowds.
You also get the other part. Did you notice when, because obviously they had to pretend the Pacers had home court?
Yes.
And they started doing the defense, chant from the PA system.
I felt so bad for the Pacers mascot, Boomer, who, like you said, it was a home game for Indiana here. And he's, trying to, get the crowd, and, he's pumping his little weird mascot arms. Nobody cared. It was a Spurs home game, just like it will be for the second one.
I want to take it back to your career. Obviously, many people watching here, listening, might remember you from doing The Starters.
Yep.
That concept of covering the NBA in the way you guys did. How did that come about? Was that just your personalities merging together and the way you look at the game?
Yeah, I mean, before The Starters, we were the Basketball Jones, and that's sort of where we got started in Canada. And we just decided we wanted to make a podcast. This was back when nobody knew what really a podcast was, when you had to actually download it and put it on your what was it? What were they even called? iPods, I guess.
Oh, yeah, Walkmans.
Yeah,
that's before
right,
that.
right. You had to put it on vinyl. It was like a record player. So way back in the day. But we were like, if we're going to do this, we just have to be authentic. We love basketball. It started with me and Tass and JD, and then have added, Trey, of course, part of the crew now. We're just NBA sickos, and we just try and be ourselves, because that, I think, relates to other fans out there. That's what our voice is. It's we're an NBA fan just like you, and we're going to critique the game or love the game as we see it from those eyes. So we just sort of try and be as natural as you can when there's cameras and lights and mics. Yeah.
I'm curious, did you have any data on how many Europeans watch your show? Because I can imagine it was available and you can watch it on YouTube, and the way you talked about the game was not the typical American fashion. I'll come back to that later, why we need to talk about that. But
well, I think what was it, I have noticed because of the time difference for, people in Denmark or obviously in Europe, like these games are on at crazy times, obviously stateside, not for us, but for you guys. So I think a show like ours, be it when it was Basketball Jones, The Starters, or now No Dunks, it was like, it's a good like recap. Sort of can keep you up on maybe some of the stuff that might be difficult because of the time difference to watch, and stay up on the storylines and the big deals and stuff like that, and do it in a fun and entertaining way. So yeah, I've gotten that response from a lot of international people, like, oh, you really helped me sort of stay in love with the game or keep up on the game. Yeah,
I think that's a pretty key thing here, because there's a lot of talk at the moment about like the way you look at the game, the viewership numbers and all that. It's just a contrast to me how you did it like for the love of the game and because you're passionate, and then like if you watch NBA experts now, it's more about trashing players and bringing them down instead of like getting people invested in it. Yeah, is that like something you've noticed has changed, or maybe like obviously coming from someone who does coverage?
Yeah, here's the part that sucks. It's when you crap on a player, crap on a team, crap on the game, that's the stuff that gets all the clicks and all like obviously the shares and stuff like that. We are fans, but we'll call things out when we don't think, hey, the All-Star game sucks, or why don't you try this and do this better? But at the end, basketball has never been played at a higher level, period. Especially when you consider the influx of international players who are all the MVPs, who are a majority of the best players. Like, it's never been better. Are there things we can fix and tweak and in terms of the entertainment? Yeah, I think so. I would get rid of timeouts. I love the international rules a lot more. So yeah, we can do that, and maybe they will. But at the end of the day, like, these are still the best athletes in the world, and I still love to play basketball, read about basketball, and talk about it for a living amazingly, yeah.
We'll just talk about European players for a moment, because I think that we can feel that it's a European dominant league right now. Yeah. Like, you can't really get around that. And I think Americans are really trying to like take the American players and put them on the same level. Yeah, I don't know if you've noticed that. Yep. But I'm curious, as a Canadian, do you feel they are trying to claim Shai Gilgeous-Alexander?
No, I don't think they are, because I think they're doing a poor job of elevating him. I mean, he's runner-up for MVP last year. He might win it this year. I swear it goes back and forth between him and Jokic, both rightful, deserving MVP winners. It changes by the game or by the week. But no, they need to do a better job, I think, of hyping him up and putting him on that pedestal. But they are infatuated with, okay, it's got to be Anthony Edwards, or okay, I guess it's sort of Jason Tatum, or who's the next guy. But the coolest players right now are Jokic. Wembanyama's going to take the crown next year or 2 years, whatever, and then Shai's in the mix, and obviously Luka and so on. So it's some of those guys that just play entertaining basketball. I mean, Jokic and Luka especially in terms of playmaking and stuff like that, which is that international flair, I believe, where maybe Americans, and this is sort of the grassroots and the growing up, it's sort of more one-on-one sort of play. You can't really, that's not taught, it feels like, internationally, at least in European basketball. So, and that's just a more enjoyable way to watch basketball, I think. And people like to play basketball that way too. So, yeah. Yep.
To end off, you mentioned him. We can't really get around him being in Paris. You called it the Wemby Games.
Yeah.
I'm curious because as someone who has been around the league for so long, you've obviously seen a lot of buzz, like from players coming into and joining the league. Yep. Have you ever felt or seen anything like this? Does this feel like it's something special we'll look back at like 50 years from now?
I mean, knock on wood, yes, like hopefully barring no injury to him, but he seems to take a really good care of his body, and I love that he's like, he's a giant, he's 7'4", 7'5", but he's like, I don't need to bulk up, I don't need to add muscle, like I'll stay nimble, and that will be like my secret power. Yeah, we are seeing something special. Like I think you see it physically, and then you hear him talk, and how he thinks about the game and his competitive drive. That's where you're like, oh, that's what separates the great players from the good players. Like, he has that. So yeah, we're witnessing it in like live action here. One of the greatest players of all time. I think when it's done, I don't think that's that far-fetched to say. Yeah.
I think that's a pretty good note to end on.
There you go.
Skeets, thank you so much for your time.
Appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Appreciate it. How do I say?
What do you want to say?
Well, how do I say embrace the day? How do I say embrace the day?
Have en god dag.
Have en god day.
That's pretty good.
That wasn't bad.